If you are a documentary filmmaker or cinematographer who often shoots alone, in small teams, or in a run and gun style, you need to develop a light and flexible kit that allows you to adapt to stories on the fly. Over the past decade, I've been dialing in my minimalist setup while filming on projects for National Geographic, Hulu, HBO, The Washington Post, and more. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through what information I seek out ahead of time to determine the kit I'm gonna put together for a shoot. I'll go through each piece of gear in my minimalist setup, and at the end, I'll share the most critical gear swap I've made that has unlocked a new level of speed and comfort on the days where every ounce matters. Now, when I'm building my minimalist kit, it's always gonna be really dependent on what I am shooting, and so every time that I'm going to go out on a shoot, I'm going to inquire either with the director who's hiring me as a DP, or if it's one of my own projects, going to think through a number of different things that's going to determine what of this kind of baseline kit I'm going to bring and what I'm going to leave behind. So one of the very first things that I like to ask about is the visual aesthetic. The visual aesthetic is really going to determine what gear you need in your minimalist kit. Now, when I'm asking about the visual aesthetic, one of the main things I'm getting after is this a project that leans into a handheld look, or is this a project that I'm gonna need to be on sticks for, that we really need that stability that some directors like? And that is gonna determine a couple of the different tools that I might bring. For example, I have a couple different options when it comes to the stability based on the visual aesthetic. If I'm gonna go handheld, if I'm gonna go like purely handheld for a shoot, I'm almost always gonna bring the CineSaddle, which I'll link a video to in the description if you wanna learn more about the CineSaddle and how I use this. But essentially what I'll do is I have this around my neck like that, and I'll go about my shoot with the camera just resting on top of it. And so if I'm gonna be out on a long day of shooting and the director's cool with everything just kind of feeling like a handheld look, nice and naturally smooth, I'll likely just bring the CineSaddle and I'll leave any sort of other sticks support at home. However, if the director's saying, hey, you know what, actually we'd love a little bit more stability than maybe the CineSaddle can bring, that's where I have a couple different support options. So if I'm gonna be using support, let's say pods, I have two options for my kit. I have right here, this is the Sachtler Flowtech, that is the tripod, and then I have the Siri monopod. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that one. But, you know, you've probably seen this on the channel, super versatile Flowtech legs. This is a great tripod. However, it is sturdy, which also means that it is heavy. So if I'm gonna be covering a lot of ground during the day, that's not necessarily something that I want to be lugging around all day. So if possible, I might also opt in my minimalist kit to put things on a monopod. Again, I'll put a link to this in the description. Essentially, same quick release plate, just goes right like that onto the monopod and screws in right there. And then I have this as my monopod, and it's a lot lighter, can cover a lot more ground, but also, you know, I do have a little bit more sturdiness, a little bit more support than I might have if I'm going handheld the entire day. Now, that also leads me to the next question that I need to figure out as I'm preparing for a shoot that will help me design my minimalist kit. And that is, what kind of interviews might we be doing? For example, the two main interview types that I often come across in the documentary work that I do is we're either gonna be doing a stand-up interview or a sit-down interview. And the stand-up interviews, you know, maybe those will be 5-10 minutes long. I was doing a shoot last week for the Berkeley Public Health Department, and we were at this little fair, and I knew that I was gonna be pretty much working alone, but we were gonna be doing some stand-up interviews. Just about 5, 10, 15 minutes, something like that. In that case, I'm happy to bring the monopod, put this on there, and then, you know, for 10, 15 minutes, I can lift this up, and just hang out here, film the entire interview. You know, there might be like little micro shakes every once in a while, but that can be really useful. We're just doing a quick stand-up interview. However, if you're doing a sit-down interview, if you're doing an interview that might be lasting, I don't know, something in the 45-minute range, you're not gonna want to hold on to the monopod and monitor every micro shake for that long. So if you're gonna be doing longer sit-down interviews, that's probably gonna be a case where I'm gonna wanna have the tripod so that I can just set my camera on it and kind of just leave it. So those are the first two things that I'm gonna think about as I design my minimalist kit. What's the visual aesthetic? Are we going handheld? Are we on sticks? And then based on that, I'm gonna follow up with questions about are we doing any sort of interviews? Are we just gonna be moving, run and gun the whole time? Or are we gonna be doing some interviews that could possibly be stand-up or sit-down interviews? And what are the lengths of those interviews? So the next thing that I need to know to design my kit is what is our proximity to the main action? And this question really gets at what lenses might I need to bring for this documentary shoot. If I'm gonna be going super light with my kit, I'm often gonna opt for this lens right here, which is the Sony 24 to 105 f4. I think this is an awesome documentary lens. And if I'm staying really light, I'd love to just rock one lens. And I think this lens does an amazing job when it comes to that focal range. It also has that optical steady shot in the lens if you're trying to stay more smooth, and it's just super light. So I'd love to just hang on this. However, that's not always possible because you're not always within that kind of 24 to 105 range with what you're shooting. For example, I did a slightly undercover shoot that I can't really talk too much about recently, and some of the action was just further away than that 105 range. I knew I would need a little extra lens, and so that is when I might opt for bringing something like the 24 to 105, because you always want to have that wide angle possibility. But then I'll also throw the 70 to 200 Sony G Master lens. This is a 2.8 lens. I'll also throw this in my kit. Now this is a heavy piece of gear, but I think if I have two lenses, you know, those are great pairing that allows me to cover a ton of focal range in just two lenses. The fourth thing I need to figure out when I'm designing my kit is how much ground are we gonna be covering? Are we gonna be scaling a mountain, or are we gonna be in an office building where I have, you know, a place to stage gear? That's gonna determine everything from, you know, what type of tripod I'm bringing to the backpack system that I'm using to carry other gear. So how much ground are we going to be covering? And the last piece of information I need is, what does our team look like? What's our team size? Is there someone who is a production assistant whose role might be to help me as the cinematographer carry gear? Or on a shoot last year that I did in the forest of Rwanda while filming mountain gorillas, I found out that there was gonna be porters on the trek into the forest who could help me carry gear like a backpack that had a bunch of other little things that I might need but are not essential. And so if I didn't have that porter, my kit would have completely changed. So figuring out the team size is also critically important. Okay, so now let's dive into my ideal minimalist setup. And this is actually a setup that I've used 2 times in the last week on 2 different documentary projects, and I love rocking this setup. So as always, my main documentary cinema camera is the Sony FX6, and what I've been doing on these shoots is I've been using the 24 to 105. This has been my workhorse lens, and then I have been using these batteries, which is from Hawkwoods. It is a BPU 98 watt. That's gonna be my power source. And then when I'm doing these types of shoots, I'm often running my own sound. And so I'm currently plugged into the camera filming right now. So let me make sure I'm saying the name correctly for the audio system I use. So I use Sony wireless lav mics. So I have 2 of the UTX B40 wireless body pack mics. So I got one on right now. Here's this Sony. Yeah, right there. Okay. And then what I do is I have a receiver that comes on to the top of my camera right here, and that is the URX P03D dual channel receiver. So that's what I do for my sound, and what I love about that setup, and this has taken me a long time to figure out, is I can run the lav mics through the hot shoe mount on the FX6, and that means that I'm limiting just the amount of wires on the camera. It all just goes through the top handle, and I really appreciate, especially in a minimalist kit, having the fewest amount of wires and cords and things like that on the camera, just so the form factor is as streamlined and easy to deal with as possible. Similarly, on the mic, my onboard shotgun mic, this is the mic that I use for most of my YouTube videos and documentary work. This is the Sennheiser MKH 8060, and it's like a super small little mic, super light. And then I got this Rycote Softy windscreen, plug it right there. And so that is my main camera setup. The other elements that I'm gonna be using in this kit is the Sony Dynamic Stereo Headphones MDR 7506. This is what I've been using to plug in, always monitor your sound. When you are running, gunning as a documentary filmmaker, listening and monitoring sound is so important. I can go into why in a separate video if you're curious. But I also think I'm going to get a new pair of headphones that are not over-ear headphones. What are they called? Earbuds, because these are getting a little cumbersome, a little big. The cord is really long. So I'm looking for something even a little bit more minimal than these. So these are solid, an industry standard, but also I'm looking for something else. And of course, my beloved Cinesaddle. I'm gonna be rocking this. Ideally, because I love the handheld look, I would just be going with like camera, lens, headphones, and the Cinesaddle. That's it. That's the kit. Before we wrap it up, I also mentioned that there's been one key gear switch that I've made in the last couple years that has really transformed the way that I can cover scenes as a solo filmmaker, a solo DP, when it comes to my speed in the field. And that has been moving from a backpack system to a belt system. So let me rearrange some things real quick and I'll show you what exactly I mean. So this is my go-to camera backpack, which is the Think Tank First Light 35L Plus. And this is a fantastic bag. We'll open it up so you can see it here. Don't have too much in it, but you can see this is a little system, bunch of storage here. Anyway, so this is my go-to camera backpack. And earlier this year, I was on a documentary shoot that followed a new professional baseball team in Oakland called the Oakland Bees. And I knew I was gonna be running around covering their home opener. I was gonna be moving all over. I was gonna be interviewing people. I was gonna be chasing people down. There was no place to really stage any gear. So I needed to go with a minimalist setup. And what I ended up doing is I ended up putting my gear, like the lenses and everything, into this backpack. And so I thought, okay, this is gonna be great. It's a very comfortable backpack. You know, you got your straps here to distribute the weight. You got your straps across your chest. So a really nice form factor that allows you to carry a lot of weight comfortably. But what I noticed was the whole day, I was out there shooting on this documentary with, you know, my Cinesaddle. I got the camera like this, and then I got the backpack on my back. And I just noticed that I was getting so tired of having this backpack on my back. I was getting so exhausted. It was a crowded environment. I kept like bumping into people, and it was just so cumbersome. And what I realized was, because I had my backpack, because I was kind of leaning into having this pretty big carrying capacity, what I did was I filled the capacity for which I had the space in the backpack. So it was like, oh, well, I have that extra pocket when I was packing the night before, might as well fill it with this, or might as well fill it with this. And what I ended up doing was I started to just bring way more gear than I needed, and way more gear than was useful for the type of shoot it was. So now what I've been doing is I've been changing the system. I've been getting away from my comfort of having the backpack, where I can really make sure I have like every little piece of gear that I might need, because it's so scary if you think about not having something that might come up. And what I've been doing is I've been changing it out for a belt system. So specifically, this belt is the Press Pass 20 from Think Tank. This is not sponsored. This is just the best solution that I have found. And so instead of carrying the backpack, what I do is I put this little sling, wrap it around my waist, cinch it up. Okay, and then if I'm going again handheld with the CineSaddle, I have this. And then instead of having that huge weight down on my back with the backpack and moving all day with that, now I just have this little sling bag right here, which I can either have on my back, but I can easily, swing it around to the front of my body if I need to get something out of it, and then quickly sling it back, have my CineSaddle up front. Or maybe I don't need the CineSaddle at some point, and I'm just going like that. I'm just moving around like that. And there are so many things that you can do with this sling bag. What I will usually do, and how I will make use of this, is I think about, okay, I need just my essentials in here for a full day of shooting. So depending on how long you're gonna be shooting, I'm gonna have one of my pockets. So here's the innards. I'll give you another B-roll shot of this, but here are the innards, three different main pockets, and then you also have a zipper pocket in front. So one of those pockets, I am going to put batteries, depending on how many hours you are going to be shooting and your experience of how long your particular batteries last. One of my main pockets here in the sling is going to be for batteries. For me, I can usually get away with 2 of the Hawkwood batteries, but then maybe I'll put an additional kind of Sony BPU 60 in there as well, just for safety. The next main pocket that I'm often using is for sound. So usually I'll have a couple lav mics that are sitting in there, and as well as the lav mics, I will have this little baggie, which is kind of, accessories that I'd need to tape the mic to people, little windscreens for the lav mics. So I have my audio pocket. Another pocket, I will have kind of miscellaneous cleaning supplies. I'll have, the rocket blower. I'll have the, a little lens cloth cleaner. And then I will also additionally, in one of the pockets here, I'll carry batteries. Batteries. That's for the lav mic system. And then if I am also going to be shooting with the 70 to 200 lens, if I do need that extra bit of length, the really nice thing about the Press Pass 20 as compared to some of the other sizes is that this also will be able to fit the 70 to 200. Put that in, and then you're good to go. Again, sling it around. I'll kind of wear it on my back oftentimes, and then I'm good to go. And It's very comfortable around the waist. I'm not carrying too much weight, even with that 70 to 200. And I feel like I can cover a lot of ground in a really nimble and fast way with this setup. Now, the opposite end of the backpack, like I was saying, when you have a big backpack, you may be tempted, like I am, to fill up every little space you have. Whereas if you use a belt system like this, then you're gonna be packing the night before your shoot and thinking really critically about, like, what is everything I might genuinely need? I don't wanna pack too much. What do I genuinely need? How many memory cards do I need? One of the reasons that I get memory cards that are 256 gigs instead of 128 gigs is so that I have to switch out fewer times. So, okay, I know I can get through, you know, a pretty long day of shooting with just those 2 cards in my FX6. So I might not need to pack additional memory cards. If you have the sling bag, you'll just think a lot more critically about what is just like every little thing you need. Think about like you're one of those thru hikers on the Pacific Crest Trail and every ounce matters. That's the way that we have to approach things as a solo run and gun documentary filmmaker, because every ounce does matter when we're trying to adapt to the stories that are in front of us. So this is the full minimalist kit all put together that I can use to film an entire day, cover scenes, lead and do interviews, everything just right here. Camera, support, accessories, sound, everything you need in this little tiny package. And anytime I have the opportunity to shoot with just this, I cherish it. When you pare down your kit, you become lighter, faster, and more capable at adapting to the stories changing in front of your eyes. The fact that you aren't carrying lights, stands, endless lenses, cases, and all of that, that's not something to be insecure about. Use your minimalist kit to your advantage. You'll be able to cover stories in ways that the DPs with their endless gadgets could never imagine doing. If you're interested in any of the gear that I mentioned during this video, I'll put links to everything in the description, and I'll see you back here next week for a hot and sexy topic, which is all about how I back up and organize my footage at the end of shoots as I get ready to bring everything into my editing software. Until then, go out and tell some stories.